He's faking it. I'm calling the cops. Patricia Caldwell's voice, sharp enough to cut glass, echoed across the lounge. A bead of sweat trickled down Damon's temple. He wasn't scared, just bone-deep tired. 48 hours coding, 0 sleep. Now this? She thinks he's some freeloader, not the guy about to sign the papers making him CEO. What Patricia doesn't know? Damon saw the way she sneered at the young black kid bussing tables. Saw the barely veiled contempt. She has no idea how her quiet kindness could have saved her. Instead, she chose this. And that choice? It's about to cost her everything. What happens when a power-tripping manager arrests her own CEO? In 10 minutes, the police were confused. The passengers were filming, and the entire board of directors was tendering their resignations. This is the story of the flight that never took off, and the karma that hit harder than a jumbo jet. The air inside the majestic terminal of JFK International Airport hummed with the specific expensive silence of the ultra first-class lounge. It was a silence bought with 7-figure salaries and black credit cards. Damon King sat in the corner, nursing a lukewarm, sparkling water to the casual observer, and there were many casual observers in the Apex lounge. Damon looked like a mistake. He was wearing a faded charcoal hoodie, distressed denim jeans that had seen better days, and a pair of beat-up sneakers that looked like they had run a marathon through a mudslide. He had noise-cancelling headphones around his neck and was typing furiously on a cracked smartphone. Damon was 34, black and tired. He had just spent 48 hours in a coding bunker in Silicon Valley, fixing a catastrophic security breach for a subsidiary of his holding company, Kingstream Global. He hadn't slept. He hadn't shaved. He barely looked like he belonged in a coffee shop, let alone the Apex lounge of Stratford Airlines. "Excuse me." The voice was clipped, nasal, and dripping with thinly veiled disdain. Damon didn't look up immediately. He was finishing an email to the SEC regarding a merger that was supposed to go public the next morning. "Sir, I am speaking to you. Learn." Damon sighed, his thumb hovering over the send button. He locked the screen and looked up. Standing over him was a woman who looked like she had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in intimidation. She wore the navy blue blazer of Stratford Airlines, but hers was tailored tighter, sharper. The gold name tag on her chest didn't just say staff, it read Patricia Caldwell, Regional Director of Customer Experience. She had a clipboard in one hand and walkie-talkie in the other, and her blonde bob was so stiff it looked like it could deflect bullets. "Can I help you?" Damon asked, his voice rasping slightly from lack of use. "That's actually my question for you," Patricia said, her eyes scanning him from his messy hair to his scuffed sneakers. "This area is for verified Apex members and first-class passengers only. The general boarding area for economy is out the double doors, down the escalator, and to the left. You're in the wrong place." Damon rubbed his temples. He wasn't in the mood for this. He just wanted to board, sleep for 6 hours to London, and sign the papers that would officially make him the majority shareholder of this very airline. "I know where I am," Damon said calmly. "I'm on flight SA9 to Heathrow. Seat 1A. Patricia let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a staple gun firing into drywall. "Seat 1A. Sir, Seat 1A is reserved for full-fare dignitaries and Apex Diamond members. It costs $12,000 one way. Are you suggesting you purchased a $12,000 ticket?" "I didn't purchase it." "Technically," Damon muttered. His assistant Sarah had booked it through the corporate account. "Look, I have my boarding pass right here." He reached into his hoodie pocket. Patricia flinched back as if he were reaching for a weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them. I don't want to see a digital pass on a cracked screen that could be photoshopped. I want to see ID and a physical ticket, or I want you to leave now." Around the lounge, heads began to turn. A banker in a pinstripe suit lowered his Wall Street Journal. A socialite with a poodle in her purse whispered to her companion. The spotlight was on them, and Patricia was basking in it. She was the guardian of the gate, keeping the riffraff out of the sanctuary of the elite. Damon felt the familiar heat of humiliation rising in his neck, but he pushed it down. He had dealt with people like Patricia his entire life, people who couldn't reconcile his face with his tax bracket. "My name is Damon King," he said, keeping his voice low, trying to de-escalate. "If you'll check your manifest, you'll see my name." I don't want a scene, I just want a board. I don't need to check the manifest to know when someone is trespassing, Patricia snapped. She tapped her earpiece. Security to the Apex Lounge. We have a non-compliant individual refusing to vacate the premises. Potential security threat. Damon's eyes widened. Security threat. I'm drinking water. You're loitering. You're disheveled. And you're aggressive, Patricia recited, checking imaginary boxes on her clipboard. And frankly, you're making the actual premium passengers uncomfortable. I haven't said a word to anyone but you, Damon said, standing up. He was tall, 6'3", and when he stood, Patricia had to crane her neck back. She took a step back, her eyes flashing with a mix of fear and vindication. He's standing up, Patricia shouted for the benefit of the room. He is becoming physically intimidating. Patricia, stop, Damon said, his voice hardening. You are making a mistake that you cannot afford. I suggest you pick up that tablet on the desk, type in Damon King, and look at the screen before you do something that ends your career. Patricia sneered. My career is keeping this airline pristine, Mr. King, if that is your real name. I've been the regional director for 12 years. I know every Diamond member by face. I know the senators, the CEOs, the celebrities. I don't know you. She pointed a manicured finger at the exit. Last chance. Walk away or be carried away. Damon looked at the door. He could leave. He could call his private jet, which was parked at Teterboro, and be in London an hour later than planned. It would be easier. But then he looked at the banker in the corner, who was smirking. He looked at the young black staff member behind the buffet counter, who was watching with wide, terrified eyes, silently, begging Damon to comply so he wouldn't get hurt. Damon realized this wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about the culture of the company he was about to buy. A culture that allowed Patricia Caldwell to exist. I'm not leaving, Damon said, sitting back down and crossing his legs. Call them. The silence in the lounge was shattered 3 minutes later by the heavy tread of boots. 2 airport police officers, Officer Miller and Officer Hernandez, strode in, hands resting near their belts. They looked weary. JFK was a city unto itself, and they dealt with everything from drunk tourists to smuggling rings. A dispute over a lounge chair wasn't high on their priority list, but a call from a regional director pushed it up the queue. Patricia intercepted them at the entrance, her demeanor instantly shifting from aggressive to victimized. Thank God you're here, she said, her voice trembling slightly. A performance worthy of an Academy Award. This individual has been harassing guests, soliciting money, and when I asked him to leave, he threatened me. Damon didn't move. He watched the performance with a detached curiosity. Soliciting money, that was a new one. Officer Miller, a burly man with a thick mustache, walked over to Damon. Sir, I'm going to need to see some ID and a boarding pass. Damon produced his passport and his phone, displaying the QR code for seat 1A. Miller took the passport. He looked at the photo, then at Damon. He looked at the boarding pass. He scanned it with his handheld device. Beep. Passenger, King, Damon, status. Invite only. Seat 1, A. Miller frowned. The machine didn't lie. Miss Caldwell, Miller said, turning around. This pass is valid. It scans green. He's in the system. Patricia stormed over, snatching the device from the officer's hand. That's impossible. Give me that. She stared at the screen, her face flushing a blotchy red. It's a hack. It has to be. Look at him. Does he look like he paid $12,000? Miss Caldwell, Hernandez interjected gently, the system verifies it. Maybe we should just… No, Patricia shrieked. The veneer of professionalism was cracking, revealing the ugly prejudice beneath. I know how these people operate. He probably stole a credit card number or hacked the loyalty database. We've had breaches before. I am the regional director, and I have the authority to deny boarding to anyone I deem a risk. And I deem him a risk to the safety and comfort of this flight. She turned her glare on Damon. I am voiding this ticket right now. You are banned from Stratford Airlines permanently. She began furiously tapping on her own tablet. Damon spoke up, his voice calm but icy. If you avoid that ticket, Patricia, you're triggering a clause in the corporate bylaws of this airline that you don't even know exists. Don't quote policy to me, she yelled. I wrote the policy. You wrote the customer service manual, Damon corrected. I'm talking about the Shareholder Rights Agreement, Section 4, Paragraph 2. Patricia froze for a second, confused. Then she shook its head. Officers, remove him. He is now trespassing on private property, as I have revoked his ticket. If he doesn't leave, arrest him. Miller looked uncomfortable. Sir, if she revokes the ticket, technically she has the right to ask you to leave the lounge. We can sort this out at the customer service desk outside, but you can't stay here. I'm not going to the customer service desk, Damon said. I'm waiting for my board meeting. Board meeting? Patricia laughed. What board meeting? The only meeting you're having is with a holding cell. She looked at the officers. Why are you just standing there? He is trespassing. Arrest him. Or do I need to call the commissioner? You know I have his personal number. The threat hung in the air. Miller and Hernandez exchanged a look. They knew Patricia Caldwell. They knew she made life hell for anyone who crossed her, and she did, in fact, have political connections. Sir, Miller said, his voice dropping an octave, please don't make us do this the hard way. Just grab your bag. Damon looked at the time on his phone, 10:45 a.m. Sarah should be landing right about now, he whispered to himself. Last warning, Patricia screamed. Cuff him. Damon stood up slowly. He held out his wrists. Fine, Damon said, arrest me, but make sure your body cameras are on. I want every second of this recorded. With pleasure, Patricia hissed. Miller sighed, pulled out his handcuffs, and turned Damon around. The click of the metal cuffs was deafening in the silent lounge. You have the right to remain silent, Miller began. As they marched Damon past the buffet, Patricia pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of him in cuffs. Posting this to the internal security memo, she muttered, example made. She followed them out of the lounge, down the escalator and towards the gate area, intent on parading her victory. She wanted everyone to see. She wanted the gate agents to know who was in charge. They reached the busy gate B12. Hundreds of passengers were waiting to board. They saw the police, the handcuffs, and the tall man in the hoodie. Phones came out. Flashes went off. That's right, Patricia announced to the crowd, her voice projecting like a town crier. Stratford Airlines has zero tolerance for scammers and trespassers. We keep our skies safe. Damon kept his head up, looking straight ahead. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at the tarmac through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A sleek black Gulfstream G650 had just taxied up right next to the Stratford commercial jet. The stairs of the private jet were lowering. Wait, Officer Hernandez said, stopping in his tracks. Why is a private jet parking at a commercial gate? Patricia frowned. That's unauthorized. Who is that? I'll have them towed. The door of the Gulfstream opened. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in a sharp white power suit, holding a briefcase. She ran down the stairs, followed by two men in suits who looked like Secret Service. She didn't head for the terminal building. She ran straight across the tarmac, flashed a badge to the ground crew, and bounded up the jet bridge stairs of Gate B12. Seconds later, the door from the jet bridge burst open. The woman in the white suit sprinted into the gate area, scanning the crowd frantically. Her eyes locked on Damon King, standing in handcuffs next to the pretzel stand. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She ran over, shoving Patricia Caldwell out of the way with surprising force. Hey, Patricia yelled, who do you think? The woman ignored her. She stopped in front of Damon, horrified. Mr. King, she cried. Oh my God, I got your text. I'm so sorry I'm late. She turned to Officer Miller, her eyes blazing with a fury that made Patricia's anger look like a toddler's tantrum. Take those cuffs off him right now. And who are you? Patricia demanded, stepping back into the fray. This man is a criminal. He is banned from this airline. The woman turned to Patricia. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a titanium ID card that shimmered under the airport lights. I am Sarah Jenkins, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Chief Legal Officer for Kingstream Global, she pointed at Damon. And you just arrested the man who bought Stratford Airlines this morning. That is Damon King, your new CEO. The silence that fell over Gate B12 was heavy enough to crush a car. Patricia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the hoodie. She looked at the handcuffs. She looked at the private jet outside. Damon smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Hello, Patricia, Damon said softly. I believe we have a board meeting to attend, and you're late. Officer Miller's key fumbled at the lock. His hands, previously steady, were now shaking so violently that he scratched Damon's wrist. Click! The handcuffs fell away. Damon rubbed his wrists, the red indentations clearly visible against his skin. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence at gate B12 was absolute. Even the crying baby in row 4 of the seating area had seemingly decided to hush out of respect for the sheer magnitude of the disaster unfolding. "Mr. King," Officer Miller stammered, taking a step back and removing his cap. I had no idea. We were acting on the information provided by the complainant. I apologize sincerely." Damon looked at the officer. "You were doing your job, officer. You were lied to. But let this be a lesson on checking your sources before you put steel on a man." "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." Damon turned his attention to Patricia. She was no longer the imposing guardian of the gate. She was a statue of cognitive dissonance. Her brain simply refused to process the input. Damon King, CEO, hoodie, handcuffs. It didn't fit her worldview. "This is ridiculous," Patricia stammered, her voice shrill but losing its power. Sarah Jenkins. You represent Kingstream. You're telling me this bum is the buyer?" Sarah Jenkins stepped forward, her heels clicking on the linoleum like gunfire. She held up her tablet, displaying a live feed of the London Stock Exchange. "The acquisition was finalized 45 minutes ago." "Patricia," Sarah said, her voice dripping with professional venom, "Kingstream Global now owns 51% of Stratford Airlines. Mr. King isn't just a passenger, he is the chairman of the board. He is the majority shareholder. And technically, as of 10 a.m., he is the only reason this airline hasn't declared bankruptcy." Sarah swiped the screen and shoved it toward Patricia, "And you just had him arrested for drinking water." The passengers, realizing the show was over and the justice was beginning, started cheering. A teenager in the front row shouted, "Sue her!" Someone else yelled, "Refunds for everyone!" Patricia looked around, panic finally setting in. She looked at the gate agents, her subordinates, for support. They all suddenly found the floor very interesting. The young man she had berated earlier was actively smiling. "Mr. King," Patricia tried to pivot, forcing a grotesque, terrified smile onto her face. "Sir, obviously there has been a misunderstanding. I am known for my strict adherence to security protocols. I was merely trying to protect the integrity of the brand. I'm sure you can appreciate a manager who is vigilant." Damon stared at her. He didn't blink. "Vigilant?" Damon repeated. "Is that what you call it?" "I call it profiling. I call it incompetence. And I call it a liability." He turned to Sarah. "Is the board assembled?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "They are waiting in the Diamond Conference Suite upstairs. They've been waiting for the buyer for 20 minutes. They're getting impatient." "Good," Damon said. "Let's go." He began to walk towards the exit, Sarah and her security team flanking him. Patricia stood there trembling. She thought it was over. She thought he was just leaving her there to rot. Damon stopped. He didn't turn around. "Patricia," he called out. "Yes, sir." She squeaked, hope flaring in her chest. "Come with us." Patricia blinked. "Excuse me?" "You wanted to enforce the rules," Damon said, turning his head slightly. "You wanted to make sure everything was done by the book. So let's go do it by the book. I want you to introduce me to the board." "Me?" Patricia felt a wave of nausea. "But look at you. You're not dressed for a meeting, and I need to write an incident report." "The incident is walking up the stairs, Patricia," Damon said coldly. "Move." It wasn't a request. Patricia Caldwell, legs shaking, fell into line behind the man she had handcuffed, flanked by the police officers who were now acting as Damon's personal honor guard. They marched through the terminal. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Passengers filmed them on TikTok, live streaming the Karen Walk of Shame. As they ascended the escalator to the upper level where the executive offices were located, Damon pulled his phone out. He saw the notification. The video of his arrest was already trending on Twitter. Stratford racism was the #1 hashtag in New York. "Perfect," Damon whispered. "What was that, sir?" Sarah asked. "I said," Damon replied, adjusting his hoodie, "it's time to clean house." The Diamond Conference Suite was a sanctuary of mahogany, leather, and old money. It smelled of cigar smoke and stagnation. Seated around the massive oval table were the 12 members of the Stratford Airlines Board of Directors. They were the old guard men and women who had inherited their seats or bought them decades ago. They were the reason the airline was failing. They cut costs on maintenance to fund their bonuses. They slashed employee pensions to buy artwork for the lounge. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, the outgoing chairman. He was 65, silver-haired, and wore a suit that cost more than Damon's first car. "Where is this king character?" Sterling grumbled, checking his gold Rolex. "He's 30 minutes late. Typical tech money. No respect for tradition." "I heard he's young," said Ellis Thorne, a board member with a face like a bulldog. "Some Silicon Valley prodigy, probably wearing a turtleneck and thinking he's Steve Jobs. We'll eat him alive. Richard, we'll take his capital, keep our seats, and run the company exactly how we always have." "Agreed," Sterling said, pouring himself a scotch. "He thinks because he knows code, he knows aviation. We'll bury him in bureaucracy within a month. He'll be a silent partner before Christmas." The heavy oak doors burst open. The board members turned, annoyed. They expected a secretary or a waiter. Instead, they saw Patricia Caldwell. She looked like she had walked through a hurricane. Her hair was disheveled, her mascara was running, and she was hyperventilating. "Patricia," Sterling frowned, setting down his glass, "what is the meaning of this? This is a closed session." "Mr. Sterling," Patricia gasped, tears streaming down her face, "please, you have to help me. There's a maniac. He's—" She was cut off by Sarah Jenkins walking in. "Good morning, gentlemen," Sarah said sharply. "Sarah," Sterling looked confused, "you're the lawyer for the acquisition group. Where is your boss?" "He's right here," Sarah said, stepping aside. Damon King walked in. The contrast was jarring. In a room full of three-piece suits and cufflinks, Damon looked like he had just rolled out of a dorm room. The hoodie, the jeans, the sneakers. But it was the energy he carried that sucked the air out of the room. He didn't walk like a student. He walked like a predator entering a cage of slow, fat rabbits. Sterling stood up, his face wreathing. "Who is this? Is this a joke, Patricia? Why is the IT support staff in the boardroom?" Patricia let out a small whimper and covered her face with her hands. Damon walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, the one opposite Sterling. He pulled it out and sat down. He didn't speak. He just placed his cracked phone on the polished mahogany table. "Get out!" Elias Thorne shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Security, Patricia! Call security!" "I am the security," Damon said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I am Damon King," he continued, "and as of 45 minutes ago, I own this table. I own the chair you're sitting in, Elias. I own that scotch you're drinking, Richard." The room went dead silent. Sterling looked at Sarah. Sarah nodded, confirming the identity. Sterling laughed, a nervous, sputtering sound. You are Damon King, the billionaire." He gestured to the hoodie. "Well, you look like you just hopped a fence. And you look like you're bankrupting a legacy," Damon shot back. "But we're not here to talk about fashion. We're here to talk about why I'm late." Damon pointed a finger at Patricia, who was cowering near the door. 10 minutes ago," Damon said, addressing the table. "Your regional director of customer experience had me handcuffed and arrested in the Apex Lounge. She told me I didn't look like I belonged. She profiled me. She humiliated me. And she did it quoting your policies." Sterling palled. He looked at Patricia. "You arrested the new owner." "I didn't know," Patricia wailed. "He was wearing a hoodie. He wouldn't show a physical ticket. He showed a digital pass." Damon snapped, his voice rising for the first time. "A pass that you claimed was fake because your brain couldn't compute a black man in first class without assuming fraud." Damon turned back to the board. "But here is the twist," Damon said, leaning forward. "Patricia isn't the problem. She's just a symptom. She's the rot that grows when the foundation is wet." "Now see here," Sterling blustered, trying to regain control. "What happened downstairs is unfortunate, and Patricia will be disciplined, perhaps suspended for a week. But let's not be dramatic. We have a company to run. We have quarterly projections to discuss." "There are no projections," Damon said. He tapped his phone. The cracked screen lit up. "Sarah, please distribute the folders." Sarah pulled a stack of black folders from her briefcase and slid one to each board member. Sterling opened his. His eyes went wide, his hand went to his chest. "What is this?" Sterling whispered. "That," Damon said, "is the audit I performed myself over the last 48 hours. I told you I was in a coding bunker fixing a breach. I lied. I wasn't fixing a breach. I was hunting." Damon stood up and began to pace around the table. "I found the ghost accounts, Richard, the offshore shell companies where you've been funneling the maintenance budget. I found the emails between you and Elias laughing about cutting the pension fund." He stopped behind Patricia, and I found the memos, Damon said softly. "The internal memos sent from this board to regional managers like Patricia. Memos instructing them to aggressively police the lounges to filter out undesirables. You incentivized her behavior. She was just doing what you paid her to do." Patricia looked up, shocked. "Wait, you knew? You told me to be strict." "Silence," Sterling roared at her. He looked at Damon, sweat beading on his forehead. This is private data. You hacked us. That's illegal. I own the servers." Damon laughed. "I can't hack my own company. I was doing due diligence, and what I found is fraud, embezzlement, and gross negligence." Damon walked back to the head of the table. "So here is how this is going to work." He looked at the clock on the wall. "It is 11:10 a.m. By 11:20 a.m., 10 minutes from now, every single person at this table will sign a letter of resignation effective immediately. You will forfeit your severance packages. You will forfeit your stock options." "You're insane," Elias Thorne shouted. "We'll sue you. We'll drag you through court for years. You can't just fire the whole board." "I'm not firing you," Damon said calmly. "I'm giving you a choice." He pointed to the big screen on the wall. He tapped his phone again. The screen flickered to life. It showed a paused video file. The thumbnail was Richard Sterling accepting a bribe from a construction contractor. "I have 3 terabytes of data," Damon said. "If you resign, I bury it. You walk away with your reputations intact. You get to retire to the Hamptons and tell your friends you clashed with the new vision. You keep your freedom." Damon's eyes hardened. "But if you don't resign in the next 10 minutes, I send this folder to the FBI, the SEC, and the New York Times." Damon sat down and put his feet up on the table, crossing his beat-up sneakers right next to Sterling's face. "Clock's ticking, gentlemen." The room was silent for 10 seconds. Then the sound of a pen scratching on paper broke the silence. It was Elias Thorne. He was signing his resignation. He pushed the paper towards Sarah and practically ran out of the room. One by one, the dominoes fell. The bravado evaporated. These men were bullies. And like all bullies, they crumbled when punched back. Sterling was the last. He looked at Damon with pure hatred. "You'll ruin this airline," Sterling spat. "You don't know how this world works." "I'm changing how this world works," Damon replied. Sterling signed. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and stormed out. The room was empty, save for Damon, Sarah, and Patricia. Patricia was still standing by the door, looking like a deer in headlights. The board was gone. Her protectors were gone. Damon took his feet off the table. He picked up his water bottle. "Well," Damon said to Sarah, "that was easier than I thought." He turned to Patricia. "Patricia." "Yes, Mr. King," she whispered. Am I fired too?" Damon looked at her. He saw the fear, he saw the prejudice, but he also saw someone who had just watched her entire reality collapse. "Fired?" Damon mused. "No, that would be too easy. If I fire you, you go get a job at another airline and do the same thing to someone else." He stood up and walked over to her. "You're not fired, Patricia, but you are demoted." "Demoted?" she asked, confusion clouding her eyes. "Sarah," Damon said, "what is the hardest, grittiest entry-level job we have?" Sarah smiled. "Wicked. Baggage handler, Terminal C graveyard shift. Heavy lifting, and the uniforms are polyester." Damon nodded. "Perfect." He looked Patricia in the eye. "You want to keep your pension? You want to keep your benefits? Fine. You report to Terminal C tonight at 10 p.m. You're going to load bags. You're going to sweat. You're going to work alongside the people you looked down on for 20 years. And if you're late, or if you complain once, then you're fired with cause and you lose everything." Patricia's jaw dropped. "Baggage handler, but I'm a director." "Not anymore," Damon said, walking past her toward the door. "Now you're just an employee. Welcome to the team." Damon walked out of the boardroom, leaving Patricia alone in the wreckage of the old regime. The wind on the tarmac at JFK in November cuts differently than the air-conditioned breeze in the Apex Lounge. It is sharp, smelling of burnt kerosene and exhaust, and it carries a grit that settles into your pores and refuses to leave. Patricia Caldwell stood near the belly of a Boeing 777. It was 300 a.m. She was not wearing her tailored navy blazer. She was wearing a neon orange high-visibility vest that was 2 sizes too big, stained with grease from a previous shift. Her stiff blonde bob, once her armor, was now flattened under a hearing protection headset that pinched her temples. Her manicured nails were gone, replaced by short, jagged edges. One had snapped off an hour ago when she tried to lift a specialized golf bag that weighed as much as a small engine. "Yo, new girl, wake up!" The shout came from the belt loader. It was Frank, her shift supervisor. Frank was a man built like a refrigerator, with a beard that contained more wisdom than Patricia's entire career. He had been a baggage handler for 20 years. In her previous life, Patricia would have fired him for his untucked shirt. Now he owned her. I'm moving, Patricia yelled back, her voice lost in the whine of the auxiliary power unit. She grabbed the handle of a massive hard-shell Samsonite. She groaned as she heaved it onto the belt. Her back screamed. Her lower lumbar felt like it was being compressed by a vice. She had been standing for 5 hours. In the lounge, standing meant hovering by the podium to judge people's shoes. Here, standing meant bracing yourself against the blast of jet engines while tossing 50 lb weights. This was the karma Damon King had prescribed. It wasn't a prison cell. It was the invisible engine of the industry she claimed to love, and it was crushing her. "Hey," a voice said beside her. Patricia turned. It was Leo, a young guy, maybe 22. He was chewing gum and tossing bags with a rhythm that looked effortless. "You're the lady, right?" Leo asked, not breaking his rhythm. Patricia wiped sweat from her forehead with a dirty glove. "What lady?" "The don't you know who I am lady?" Leo chuckled. "Saw you on TikTok. My cousin sent me the remix. It's got a techno beat now." Patricia felt the heat rise in her cheeks, hotter than the jet exhaust. "I was a director." "Yeah, and now you're a tosser just like us," Leo said, slamming a duffel bag onto the belt. "Watch your fingers on the zipper. It bites." Patricia didn't answer. She just grabbed the next bag. It was a pet carrier. A large dog was barking inside. "Careful with the live cargo," Frank shouted from the top of the loader. "That dog is worth more than your house." Patricia lifted the crate gently, her arms trembling. She looked through the grate. The dog looked scared. "I know how you feel," she thought. Suddenly, a sleek black car pulled up to the side of the aircraft. It was the VIP transport. Patricia froze. In her old life, she would have been up there greeting the VIP, offering them a hot towel and a glass of champagne. She watched as a family stepped out. The father was a tall man in a suit, looking impatient. He was yelling at the ground crew because his stroller wasn't waiting for him at the door. "Where is the valet?" the man shouted, his voice carrying over the wind. "I am a Diamond member. I demand service." Patricia watched him. She saw the arrogance. She saw the way he looked at the ground crew like they were furniture, like they were dirt. Is that what I looked like? The thought hit her harder than the suitcases. For 12 years, she had looked at people like Frank and Leo as resources, as cost centers. She had looked at passengers like Damon as risks. She had never looked at them as people. "Stop staring and load," Frank barked. "We got a slot time to hit. You want to explain to the tower why we missed our window." Patricia gritted her teeth and grabbed another bag. It was heavy. It slipped from her grip and slammed onto her toe. "Ah!" she cried out, hopping on one foot, tears springing to her eyes. "Walk it off," Frank yelled. "Plane doesn't wait for a sore toe." "Wow." Patricia limped back to the belt. She was cold. She was in pain. She was humiliated. And then it got worse. The ramp lead drove up in a tug. He hopped out and walked over to Frank. He was holding a clipboard. "Hey, Frank, new memo from corporate." Frank took the clipboard. He read it and whistled. "Damn, the new boss isn't playing." "What is it?" Leo asked, leaning in. "It's a dignity in labor bonus," Frank read aloud. "Effective immediately. All ground crew and baggage handling staff are receiving a 15% pay bump and upgraded health care. Signed, Damon King." Leo whooped and high-fived the air. Yes, finally. King is the man. Patricia stood there, her hands hanging by her sides, a 15% raise. In her old job, she had fought against raising the minimum wage for ground crew. She had argued it would dilute shareholder value. Now, that raise was the only reason she might be able to afford rent on the small apartment she had to move into after losing her director's salary. The irony tasted like ash in her mouth. The man she tried to arrest was now the only man looking out for her, even while he punished her. "Hey, new girl," Frank called out, looking at her with a strange expression. "Pity, maybe. You hear that? You got a raise. First day, and you're already making bank. You should write a thank you note to the CEO." Patricia looked up at the first-class windows of the plane above her. She imagined Damon King sitting there sipping water, wearing his hoodie. "Get back to work," she whispered to herself, grabbing a suitcase. "Just get back to work." 3 months passed. The world had moved on from the initial shock of the arrest, but the business world was still vibrating from the aftershocks. The video of Damon King in handcuffs had become more than a meme. It was a cultural touchstone. It was being taught in Harvard Business School under the module Leadership and Bias. Stratford Airlines, once a dusty relic of the skies, was undergoing a metamorphosis. Damon King didn't just fire the board, he gutted the culture. The Apex Lounge was renamed the Community Hub. The dress codes were relaxed. The strict hierarchy that Patricia had worshipped was dismantled. Damon sat in his office, not the corner office with the mahogany desk, but a glass-walled pod in the middle of the open-plan operations floor. He liked the noise. He liked seeing the people who made the airline run. Sarah Jenkins walked in, holding a tablet. She looked tired but exhilarated. "Quarterly numbers are in," she said, sitting on the edge of his desk, and Damon asked, not looking up from his monitor. "Revenue is up 12%, Sarah said, "but here is the crazy part. Customer satisfaction scores are up 40%. Employee retention is at an all-time high. The Dignity and Labor Initiative is paying for itself in productivity." Damon smiled. "See," I told Sterling, "you treat people like humans. They work like heroes. You treat them like gears, they break." "Speaking of gears," Sarah said, swiping her tablet screen, "I have your monthly report on the special project." Damon stopped typing. He swiveled his chair. "Patricia." "Patricia," Sarah confirmed. "She's still there. Terminal C. She hasn't quit." Damon raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "I gave her 3 weeks. I thought she'd walk." "She's close," Sarah admitted. "She's lost 20 lb. She looks rough, but she hasn't missed a shift. Her supervisor, Frank, says she's actually adequate, slow but thorough." Damon leaned back. "Does she know I get reports on her?" "No, she thinks you've forgotten her." Damon stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the expanse of JFK. He could see the tiny ants of the ground crew moving in the distance. "It's time," Damon said. "Time for what?" Sarah asked. "To fire her or to bring her back?" "Time to see if the software update took hold," Damon said cryptically. "Get the car. We're going to the tarmac." 30 minutes later, Damon's black SUV rolled onto the secure side of Terminal C. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that turned the tarmac into a slip and slide. Damon stepped out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing his signature hoodie and a high-vis vest over it. He wanted to blend in, though his face was now too famous to be truly anonymous. He walked towards the belt loader of a flight arriving from Chicago. He saw her. Patricia was struggling with a heavy military duffel bag. She was soaked. Her hair was plastered to her skull. She looked older, harder. The arrogance that had defined her face was gone, replaced by a permanent grimace of exertion. Damon watched from the shadow of the wing. He watched as a new employee, a young girl who looked terrified, dropped a bag. The bag burst open, spilling clothes onto the wet tarmac. The girl panicked. "Oh God, oh God, I'm going to get fired." In the old days, Patricia would have screamed. She would have pulled out her clipboard. She would have humiliated the girl. Damon held his breath. Patricia stopped the belt. She wiped her face. She looked at the girl. "Stop crying," Patricia said. Her voice was raspy. She walked over. The girl flinched. Patricia knelt down on the wet ground. "Grab the other side. We have to scoop it up before the clothes get soaked quickly." Patricia began shoving clothes back into the bag with urgency, but not anger. She zipped it up. She checked the tag. It's damaged, Patricia muttered. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a roll of heavy-duty tape, something she had clearly learned to carry. She taped the zipper shut. Listen to me, Patricia said to the girl, grabbing her shoulder. Don't report this as a burst. Report it as received damaged. If you say it burst, it's on you. If it's received damaged, it's the originating station's fault. The girl blinked. You're helping me lie. I'm helping you survive, Patricia said gruffly. I used to write these rules. I know the loopholes. Now get back on the line before Frank sees us. Damon let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He walked out of the shadows. Good advice, Damon said. Patricia froze. She knew that voice. She turned slowly. When she saw Damon, she didn't straighten up. She didn't try to fix her hair. She just stood there clutching the roll of tape. She looked like a soldier caught in the trenches. Mr. King, she said. No venom, no fear, just exhaustion. Miss Caldwell, Damon nodded. You taught the rookie how to dodge a write-up. That's against policy. Patricia looked at the ground. The policy is stupid. The bags are overpacked. If she gets written up, she loses her safety bonus. She needs the money. Damon stepped closer. The rain drummed on the fuselage above them. You care about her money? Damon asked. I know what it costs to live now, Patricia said quietly. She looked him in the eye. I know how much a gallon of milk is. I know what it feels like when your feet bleed after a shift. I didn't know that before. And the passenger? Damon asked. The one whose bag that is. He packed too much. Patricia shrugged. But I taped it. His clothes are dry. I did my job. Damon studied her. The transformation wasn't complete. She was still cynical, but the blind spots were gone. She had been forced to see the world from the bottom up. You hate it here, Damon stated. I hate the cold, Patricia admitted. I hate the smell. I hate the noise. But you're still here. I have nowhere else to go, she said simply. And frankly, the team here relies on me. I know the airport codes better than anyone. I catch routing errors before the bags get on the plane. Damon nodded. He made a decision. I have a problem, Patricia, Damon said. Patricia blinked. You have billions of dollars. What problem could you have? I have a disconnect, Damon said. My executives in the glass tower don't know what's happening on the ground. They write policies that look good on paper but fail in the rain, like the one that almost got that girl fired. Patricia waited. I need a liaison, Damon said. Someone who speaks executive but understands tarmac. Someone who can look at a policy and tell the board this is garbage and here is why. Patricia's eyes widened slightly. You want to promote me? No, Damon said sharply. I'm not putting you back in charge of people. You're not ready for that. Maybe never. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a new ID badge. It wasn't a director's badge. It was a consultant badge. I'm creating a role, operations auditor. You don't manage anyone. You don't have a staff. You report directly to Sarah. Damon tossed the badge to her. She caught it. Your job is to walk the floor, find the stupid rules, find the broken processes, and fix them. But you wear the vest. You work the shifts. You are the voice of the ground crew in the boardroom, but you stay on the ground. Patricia looked at the badge. It was a lifeline. It was a way out of the purgatory, but not a return to the ivory tower. Why? She asked, her voice cracking. After what I did to you. Because you were right about one thing, Damon said, turning to leave. You know every inch of this airline. And now that you've learned humility, you might actually be useful. He stopped and looked back. Report to Sarah on Monday, but finish your shift, Caldwell. Frank says the London flight is heavy tonight. Damon got back in the SUV. The door closed. Patricia stood in the rain. She looked at the badge. Then she looked at the terrified girl next to her. Patricia clipped the badge into her pocket, hidden under the vest. All right, Patricia clapped her hands, her voice gaining a hint of its old authority, but tempered with a new grit. You heard the man. London flight, heavy load, lift with your knees, not your back. Let's go. As she turned back to the belt, for the first time in months, Patricia Caldwell didn't feel like a victim. She felt like she was earning her keep. 1 year later, the winter storm that hit the East Coast was not just a weather event. It was a logistical apocalypse. They named it Winter Storm Goliath. JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia were essentially buried under 2 ft of concrete hard snow. Inside the Stratford Airlines command center, now dubbed Mission Control, the mood was frantic. The room was a wall of screens, all flashing red, delayed, cancelled, diverted. Damon King stood at the helm. He hadn't slept in 20 hours. The airline was burning cash by the second, but more importantly, there were 3,000 passengers stranded in the terminals, sleeping on CS. "We have to shut down operations," said Marcus, the new VP of operations. He was a sharp guy hired from a logistics firm, but he had never thrown a bag in his life. "The dicing fluid is running low at Terminal 4. If we don't halt departures, we risk a safety incident. We need to cancel the next 48 hours of flights." Damon rubbed his chin. Cancelling 48 hours meant a PR nightmare and a loss of $50 million, but safety was paramount. "You're sure we're out of fluid?" Damon asked. "The inventory system says 0, Marcus replied, tapping his pristine iPad. "The tankers can't get through the snowdrifts on the access road. It's over, Damon. We have to call it." Damon was about to nod. He was about to give the order. "The system is wrong." The voice came from the back of the room. Patricia Caldwell walked in. She was wearing her yellow high-vis vest over a thick parka. Her boots were caked in slush. She held a walkie-talkie in one hand and a steaming cup of bodega coffee in the other. She looked exhausted, weathered, and absolutely certain. Marcus frowned. "Excuse me. Who let the ground crew in here?" "She's the auditor," Damon said, silencing Marcus with a look. "Go on, Patricia." Patricia walked up to the massive digital map. She pointed to a remote hangar on the far side of the airfield. "The inventory system is automated," Patricia said, her voice raspy. "It tracks the main tanks, but it doesn't track the reserve barrels we store in Hangar 9 for the cargo fleet." "Hangar 9 is defunct," Marcus argued. "We don't use it." "We don't use it for passengers," Patricia corrected him. "But I was out there 2 hours ago helping the guys dig out a tug. I checked the back lot. There are 50 barrels of Type 1 de-icing fluid sitting there under a tarp. It's not in the system because nobody bothered to scan it in 3 years ago." She looked at Damon. "It's enough to clear the runway and get the transatlantic fleet out tonight. We don't have to cancel. We just have to send a truck to get it." Marcus sputtered. "But the access road is blocked. How do we get it?" Patricia smiled, a small, grim smile. "We don't use the road. We use the baggage carts. We chain them together, drive across the tarmac where the plows have already cleared, and ferry the barrels, one by one. I already have Frank and the team rigging the carts. We just need your authorization." The room went silent. The executives looked at the digital screens. Patricia looked at the reality. Damon looked at Patricia. He saw the woman who had once cared more about a passenger's hoodie than their value. Now she was the only person in the room who knew where the hidden assets were because she had been out in the snow while the executives were drinking espresso. "Do it," Damon said. "Already rolling," Patricia said, lifting her walkie-talkie. "Frank, go." Green light. 6 hours later, the first Stratford Airlines jet lifted off the runway, blasting through the snow into the clear night sky. It was the only airline flying out of JFK that night. Damon stood by the window of the command center, watching the plane ascend. The red lights on the board were turning green. He felt a presence beside him. "You saved us about $10 million tonight." "Caldwell," Damon said quietly. Patricia stood next to him. She had taken off her parka. She looked at the plane. "I didn't do it for the $10 million, she said. "Why then?" "Because there's a grandmother in Terminal 4 trying to get to London to see her new grandson," Patricia said. "I saw her crying near the gate. I told her I'd get her out." Damon turned to look at her. It was the complete inverse of their first meeting. She wasn't policing the gate. She was opening it. "You know," Damon said, "the board seat is open. Elias Thorne's old seat." Patricia laughed, a genuine tired laugh. "No thank you, Mr. King. I don't belong in a boardroom. The chairs are too comfortable. You fall asleep and forget what the world looks like." She adjusted her vest. "I belong on the ground. That's where the truth is." She turned to leave. "I'm going home to sleep for a week. Don't call me." "Patricia," Damon called out. She stopped. "The hoodie." Damon smiled. "The one I wore that day. I still have it." "Burn it." Patricia deadpanned. It was a fashion crime then, and it's a fashion crime now. Being rich doesn't give you style, sir. She walked out. Damon King, the billionaire CEO, stood alone in the control tower and laughed. He had bought an airline to prove a point. He had ended up building a family. The karma hadn't just hit back, it had healed. Burn it. That was the final word from the woman who once tried to arrest her own boss. What Damon King did wasn't just revenge, it was rehabilitation. He realized that firing Patricia would have been easy, but forcing her to walk a mile in the shoes of the people she mistreated was a masterclass in leadership. He broke her ego to save her soul, and in the process, he saved his company. This story reminds us of a brutal truth in business and in life. Titles are temporary, power is fleeting. But how you treat people, whether they are CEOs in hoodies or baggage handlers in the rain, is the only legacy that matters. Patricia learned that the hard way. Damon King made sure she never forgot it. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a boss like the old Patricia? Or have you ever seen instant karma hit someone in real time? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reality check, and subscribe so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next one. Stay humble.